I'm speaking, you know, I have some accounting classes behind me, but the real expert is sitting back here, so he's going to correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. So I'm doing this at risk of being hung out to dry, I know this. But at our pension report for the end of 2013, our pension was at the highest amount it had ever been, $109 million, rounded off. And so you think to yourself, at least I do, gee, if our pension is the highest it's ever been, how comes it's not where it's supposed to be? I don't get it, okay? That's the short answer. Well, there's a lot of answers, though, that really address this. Number one, a maturing workforce. I can remember reading an article many years ago where Sears Roebuck was having trouble making a profit. And it compared it to a new firm, and I honestly don't remember if the new firm was Target or Kmart, but it was a newer department store. And the article went on to explain that when you have a mature company, they have people who are retiring and collecting pensions. And when you have a new company that just started up, even a Walmart, for instance, they have nobody that's collecting retirement. So therefore, it's easier for them to make a profit. I presume their ARC is lower and things of that nature. And then, with the Sears, they went through a process where they went from full-time to part-time employees. So they had fewer people paying into the pension. So all of those things can happen in business, and likewise, it is happening in government. When someone retires, they have the option of pulling all of their money out of the fund. Well, if you've been here a long time, 20, 30, 40 years, you have a lot of money in the fund. And so if you pull that out, that really takes the fund down. That's a hard hit. And if you leave it there, you can continue to draw interest. And the county's paying 4.5%, which isn't whoppers, but at the same token, the banks are paying 1 to 2%. The stock market, you can put it there, but it fluctuates. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. So it's not a bad price if you look at it overall. So there was a time when the stock market took a real nosedive. And that's when they started to tell the county, you have to pay into the pension. And my former colleague said, whoa, wait a second, that would be dumb. We know the stock market is dropping, we're just going to lose our money. So for a period of time they said, let's not put it there, let's just hold on to our money, it'll be safer in the general fund. Then the stock market turned around and started balancing out and getting a lot better. So I said, you know, we really need to make a good faith effort and make a payment to that fund. And I was told no. So at the time, I wrote up a letter because it bothered me a whole lot. And I said, this isn't right. We should be making the payment. I copied our auditor, and he said, Jo Ellen, you tell the controller you want that attached to the audit report that goes to the state, which I did. I don't know if you were still there yet then at that time or not. But I did that, and subsequent years, we actually budgeted $500,000 a year to put towards the pension. But the end of the year came, and the payment wasn't made. I said, we have to make that payment. They said the money's not there. And I would scratch my head. I'd say, where did it go? Well, at the end of the year, sometimes we get into this thing where all the money's not back. You know, it's not all paid to us. It could be we didn't get paid for the district attorney's salary. It could be this and that. So for a time, maybe we didn't have the money. But eventually, it would come in. And it just never got paid for quite a few years. So because of that, each time, the ARC was higher and higher and higher. And on top of that, the interest rates, the rate of return, was rather low on the stock market. But at least it wasn't tanking anymore. So we had low interest rates, or return, whichever you want to say, because there is some cash in our fund, some real estate, that's the REITs, and some stocks. Okay, now the next one. In my humble opinion, we have a very conservative actuary. An actuary is a mathematician who sits somewhere and calculates all the numbers, and says, okay, here's your arc. $1 million, $1.5 million, 4.5, whatever he says it is, and we're expected to pay it. And I said, I don't get it. I don't understand. And we'd look at these actuarial assumptions, and sometimes they'd assume that the employees are going to get a 5% interest, a 5% raise. And I'd say, what? There was 0% raise, or 2% max. Some contracts did have 3, but those are falling off by the wayside. I said, how can we have an assumption of a 5% employee raise? It doesn't make sense. And there were other things. That's just one I can remember easily. So this conservative actuary, I would liken to, if we just went through a reassessment last year, and in that reassessment, a lot of people came in with appraisals. And think about this. If you're going to the bank and you get an appraisal for your house, and it's for the bank because they're going to lend you money, you will get a conservative appraisal. If you want to put your house on the market to sell it, and you have no idea what to ask for it, you're going to call and get an appraisal, and they're going to give you a more liberal appraisal or assessment because you want to get top dollar. You want to list it for the best you can. Now, there's a medium in there, isn't there? And that's usually what the commissioners go for when they're hearing an assessment appeal. And I just use that as an example. I don't know if that'll help or not to draw a parallel to the conservative actuary. I really think that I don't want a liberal actuary because that can get us in trouble too, but I think having a very conservative actuary is actually hurting us because it's saying we owe more money than we really do. That's my humble opinion, and I'm not the experts. I'm not. I'm using Business 101 from college. I'm using common sense, what I think is common sense, and 15 years of experience as a county commissioner. So this conservative actuary, I was talking, and I want to say it's called the W method. Am I right on that? Got a couple of accountants here. W method. And supposedly that is one that is very, very conservative. And there is another one that would work and be a little more moderate. So I don't know if we can get them to change that or not. It would ease what they're saying we owe. And again, if we didn't have the highest rate in our pension that we ever had, I wouldn't question the name. But it doesn't make sense to me how we can have the highest amount and keep owing more and more money, except that I know we have to make something. And I'd like to also say that no matter what, you have earned your pension, we are obligated to pay the pension, and you will receive your pension money. That's no questions asked. It's a liability. The commissioners are responsible to come up with the money. That can happen in a multitude of ways. And one, of course, is that we have new development, so we get more money in and can use that money. And of course, one is that you could raise taxes. I don't think it's legal to borrow. However, I can tell you that Lebanon County, this is another part that I don't understand about the Standards & Poor's rating that just happened. Because if you look at a list of all the counties in Pennsylvania, you will find out that Lebanon County is in the top third, maybe the top quarter, for the lowest per capita debt. We have a per capita debt around $212 a person. Berks, Dauphin, Lancaster, all over 500, some closer to 600. And there are counties in this state that have a per capita debt over $1,000 a person. We're in really good shape. And if you read the reports, you will also find out Lebanon County is on track to pay back our debt, 85% of it, within 10 years. 85%. We're in really good financial shape when it comes to the amount of money we borrow. Our weakness is the fact that we don't have the money in the pension plan, which we have to straighten out. We talked earlier about the budget contributions, which were not being made. And on the other hand, we started making some in recent years, not to the level it should be, but some were made. So what steps have we taken to try and remedy this situation? Well, one of the first things I asked to do about 2 years ago when we had the new Board of Commissioners, I thought, well, maybe we can get things straightened out right here, right now, today. I said, I would like a meeting with our actuary, with our investment advisor, and with our CPA, our auditor. And together, with these professionals, perhaps we can come up with a plan. Well, to my dismay, there were no conclusions and no real recommendations. So for the last 2 years, all these things have been rolling around in my head, trying to figure out a plan. So, you all know some of the things that we did do because you felt the pain. And it was because we had a problem that we had to try and get the pension debt under control. One was there was no COLA that was paid last year. Another one was that we did lower the interest to 4.5%. It was 5.5%. And as I understand it, 4% is the lowest that you could go, but we kept it 0.5% above that. And we also stopped the $500, and I know this is hard. It was hard for me, believe me, but stopped the $500 medical payments, or supplement as you might want to call it. So, and we did start to contribute to the plan. The other thing that we were successful in doing is getting the actuary to reduce the pay projection. In other words, instead of saying that there was a 5% assumption, we did get it down, I think, to 3%. So reduce the pay projection, which everything adds up and helps somewhat. When we went from 5 down to 3% pay projection in the actuary's report, that saved $80,000 an interest point. It's something. 160,000 down. And when we paid no COLA, that kept $700,000 in the pension to try and help balance it. That's how much it costs, the COLA. There was this idea to sell Cedar Haven, the county home. And you probably know the vote was 2-1, and I was against that sale. And so there were 2 choices. And the goal is to restore the pension fund. That's our weakness. So we could adopt the CHR plan, which we paid $5,000 for. That CHR plan identified $4.5 million. It would have made Cedar Haven from this point forward completely self-sufficient, self-funding. There were some tough things in there. So I didn't come right out and say, I support it. I said, I want to know what the union thinks. So the union was given a complete copy of the plan, and they, with their head people, went over it. And we had a meeting with them the Wednesday before the Thursday when the vote was taken. And they said, we could work with this. We can talk, we will work this out. They knew that if somebody else comes in, the cuts could be even worse. If somebody's there to make a profit, the county's goal is to break even. So, I voted no, because I saw a way that we could make Cedar Haven self-funding and not go into debt anymore on their pension, which would leave the $12 million pension attributable to Cedar Haven that needed to be paid back. My plan there was to take the $1.5 million that we have in the budget this year and use that for the next 8 to 9 years until the $12 million is paid back. Now, I'm only talking about the current pension contribution that is due because of Cedar Haven. Now, you'd say, well, what about the rest of it? Well, you got to remember that 100% funding is not necessary and not necessarily recommended, because if there is a downturn, you could lose it. So you don't have to be 100% funded. In fact, 76%, 80% is normal. If we paid that back over the next 8 to 9 years, we would be at 85% funding at today's levels, okay? It would bring us up into the really good, solid market. And again, all this is outlined in the Standards and Poor's. You can read all the negative stuff, or you can read all the positive stuff, or you can weigh it together and come out with a balance. But the really big thing to solve this pension crisis that I've come up with, and ironically, we're in the middle of our CCAP Spring Conference. That's the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania. It was yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I didn't go to all the parties tonight. A lot of networking happens there. But what happened at lunch today, we did not have a speaker. But I got to sit down again with one of our money managers with our investment for the pensions. And he is on a board similar to what I tried to start here in Lebanon 2 years ago, but he's doing it out in Pittsburgh. And I said, would you like to swap stories? And we did. And now this is a man who I consider an expert. He said, Jo Ellen, everything you said makes sense. He's going to take a lot of what I said back to Pittsburgh, and he reaffirmed to me that I'm not just blowing smoke. Okay? And here's my theory. When the department heads, we have some here, former department heads, when they would make a budget, it would be a good budget, and they'd come to us and say, we need this amount of money to pay our people, to pay for our equipment, to pay whatever. The one thing that wasn't on there that I have asked for 3 different times is to include the prorated pension payment for that department. Why do you think I would want to do that? Well, all I would hear was, well, then we'd have to pay it. It's like, no kidding. It would make us accountable, number one. But number two, think about this. There is one exception, and that is the prison. The prison is 100% from our real estate tax dollars. Every other department has some sort of reimbursement from the state. 80%? I don't remember. More, 80, 90% from area agency and agent. Domestics, I think, was up around 90%. Now, some might have only been 20%. Community Action Partnership, 100%. Every one of those departments, with the exception of the prison, if I'm remembering correctly, gets reimbursement from the state. If we don't have it in our budget, pay for it and ask for it back, we're never going to get it. And you know what? If we would have done it from the beginning, we wouldn't be in this pickle. But now, it's a much higher amount than it was when we first started. But, you know, sometimes things don't come to you right away. And you got to remember, I'm not the only one. I'm the minority commissioner. And so I've been struggling and working through this. And I finally came up with this 4-point plan. It still leaves that portion, that other 12 million perhaps, I'm not sure the exact number, that is owed for the rest of the departments that haven't been paid because it hasn't been asked for when we, and the state says they'll reimburse us. The state then in turn would have to ask the federal government for reimbursement. And so there is a waiting game, but you got to get that going and lobby your legislators and get all the counties on board. But it's got to start somewhere, so let it start with us, right? Let's get paid for our people. It should not be an unfunded mandate, and right now, that's what's happening. When you do budgeting, you're supposed to have 10% of your general fund that you have as a carryover. You need carryover. You need to operate from January till March when the school tax comes in. And if you don't have it, you have to take out a TRAN, a tax revenue anticipation note, which we did, $3.5 million this year. Nobody has any problems with that from the state or the Standard & Poor's. They all say that's standard operating procedure. The collateral's there because we have the real estate to bring in the tax money.